Chijioke. Chukwuma called after finishing his prayer for the household's protection. His voice carried both authority and tenderness, a tone unmistakably Nigerian. Chijioke, come and join us. Oh. Don't you know prayer is the key? But Chijioke was nowhere to be found. The boy had woken up even earlier than the first cock's crow. Barefoot, he had tiptoed out of his small room, where his tin mattress lay neatly arranged on the floor, and slipped out through the back door. His plan was precise, perfected over weeks: escape morning prayers by pretending to be in a hurry for school. Chijioke, barely 12, was a curious boy with a mischievous streak. His lanky frame, wide eyes, and perpetual frown gave him the air of someone who was always in the middle of an argument, mostly with himself. Unlike his devout parents, he found the long hours of kneeling and repeating prayers tiresome. While he didn't mind bowing his head in church on Sundays, mostly because there were other kids to talk to, this morning routine was a different matter entirely. He couldn't understand why his parents believed prayer would change anything. If prayer was so powerful, why were they still struggling to fix the generator or keep the fridge running for more than 2 days without melting everything inside? So here he was, slipping through the muddy streets of Ajij, his schoolbag bouncing on his back as he navigated around puddles from last night's rain. Chijioke felt a surge of freedom each time he successfully dodged morning prayers. The neighborhood was still waking up, and the occasional Danfo bus rumbled by, its conductor shouting destinations in rapid-fire Yoruba. Oberland. CMS. Ikeja, the conductor called, his voice cutting through the morning haze. Chijioke smiled to himself. To him, the city already prayed enough on his behalf, through its chaos, its survival. The honking horns, the cries of hawkers, and the laughter of children playing football on unpaved streets felt more alive than his father's murmured scriptures. By the time he reached his school, a squat building with peeling paint and dusty windows, the gates were still locked. He perched on the low wall outside, waiting for the gateman to arrive, feeling a rare sense of accomplishment. Back at home, Chukwuma and Ngozi sat on the worn-out sofa, their prayer session abruptly ended by the realization that their son was missing. Ngozi sighed deeply, shaking her head. Chijioke again, she said, her voice heavy with concern. That boy thinks he's too smart for us. He doesn't know the battle we're fighting on his behalf. Chukwuma rubbed his temples, his heart heavy with a mix of frustration and pity. He had grown up in the village, where discipline was strict, and faith was non-negotiable. But Lagos had changed everything. The city was fast, chaotic, and unforgiving, and it frightened him to think that his son might grow up without the anchor of prayer to steady him. Don't worry, Chukwuma said finally, placing a hand on Ngozi's shoulder. God will touch his heart one day. He will see the power of prayer when the time is right. Ngozi nodded, though her heart was far from reassured. The school day had ended, and the streets of Ajij buzzed with the voices of children returning home. Chijioke walked with his two closest friends, Ton and Wesio. The trio made their way through the narrow, bustling roads, dodging hawkers and motorcycles, their laughter mixing with the clatter of Lagos life. Chijioke swung his bag lazily, the dusty red soil crunching under his feet as he listened to Ton recount a story about his older brother's hilarious encounter with a stubborn goat at home. Wait, so the goat didn't move until your brother brought bread? Wesio exclaimed, doubling over in laughter. Now. Ton replied. You need to see how he begged the goat as if it was his landlord. Even Chijioke couldn't help but laugh, the sound echoing through the street. As they turned a corner, they spotted an elderly woman sitting awkwardly on the ground by the roadside. Her wrapper, a faded blue with patches, was dusty, and her walking stick lay beside her. She looked frail and confused, struggling to stand on her own. Ah, see that old woman, Wesio said, nudging Ton. Maybe she fell down. The boys slowed down as they passed her, but when the old woman stretched out her hand for help, Ton and Wesio exchanged a mischievous glance. Grandma, sorry. Wesio said sarcastically, bursting into laughter. Next time, don't walk too fast. Ah, Wesio. Ton joined in. She's practicing for the Olympics. The two boys laughed louder and continued walking, leaving the woman struggling on the ground. Chijioke, however, felt a pang of guilt as he watched his friends walk away. He might not enjoy praying or see much point in his parents' endless insistence on it, but he was not a bad person. His father's teachings about kindness and respect for elders lingered in his mind. Chijioke. Let's go now. Ton called over his shoulder, but Chijioke had already stopped. You people should go, he replied, dropping his bag to the ground. He turned to the old woman, who looked up at him with tired, grateful eyes. Ma, are you okay? He asked gently, crouching beside her. The old woman nodded faintly. My son, thank you. My legs are not as strong as they used to be. I lost my balance. Chijioke reached for her arm, carefully helping her to her feet. She leaned heavily on him as he handed her the walking stick. Be careful, Ma, he said, dusting off her wrapper as she steadied herself. God bless you, my child, the old woman said, her voice trembling. You are a good boy. May you grow in wisdom and strength. Chijioke smiled shyly, unsure how to respond. He picked up his bag, ready to leave, but the woman stopped him with a hand on his arm. Wait, she said, her voice suddenly firmer. Do you pray, my son? The question caught Chijioke off guard. He hesitated, then mumbled, Not really, Ma. The old woman looked at him for a long moment, her eyes sharp despite her frailty. You are kind, and that is good. But kindness without prayer is like walking without shoes in this world. The road is rough, my child. Prayer will protect you, even when you don't see the danger. Chijioke shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't sure how to respond, so he simply nodded. Thank you, Ma. The old woman smiled and patted his arm. Go well, my son. And remember what I said. As Chijioke caught up with Ton and Wesiu, they teased him mercilessly. Hero of the year. Wesiu declared, bowing dramatically. Next time, help her carry her stick home too. Ton added, laughing. Chijioke ignored them, his mind replaying the old woman's words. He didn't know why they stuck with him, but they did. As they walked through the noisy streets, her voice seemed to echo in his ears, the road is rough. Prayer will protect you. For the first time, Chijioke wondered if there might be some truth to what his parents always said about prayer. He shook the thought from his mind, but the seed had been planted. The morning sun cast its golden glow over the Okafor household. Ngozi hummed a cheerful tune as she prepared jollof rice and fried plantains, carefully packing them into a plastic container for Chijioke's school trip. She glanced at the clock and called out, Chijioke. The boss will be here soon. Are you ready? Yes, Mama. Chijioke replied from his room. For the first time in as long as she could remember, Chijioke wasn't rushing out of the house to avoid the morning prayers. When his father called him to the living room, he came without complaint and knelt beside them on the prayer mat. Chokuma glanced at Ngozi in surprise but said nothing, choosing instead to lead the family in prayer. As his father's deep voice filled the room, Chijioke bowed his head, closing his eyes. He still wasn't sure if prayer really worked, but the old woman's words lingered in his heart. The road is rough. Prayer will protect you. When the prayers ended, Ngozi placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. May God go with you, my son, she said, her voice filled with love. Chijioke nodded, grabbed his bag, and hurried outside as the sound of the school bus honking reached their ears. The bus was already half full with excited students, their chatter and laughter filling the air. Chijioke climbed aboard and quickly spotted Ton and Wesiu at the back, waving him over. Chijioke the savior. Ton teased as he sat down. Did you help another grandma this morning? Maybe he's starting a business, Wesiu added, grinning. Grandma Rescue Services. Chijioke chuckled but didn't respond. He leaned back in his seat, letting their words wash over him without irritation. Something about the morning's prayer had left him feeling calm, as if he carried an invisible shield. The bus rumbled down the bumpy Lagos roads, the driver's radio blaring Afrobeat music. Chijioke gazed at the window, watching the familiar chaos of the city pass by. His friends were still joking about the old woman when the bus turned onto a wide road. It happened so quickly. The bus driver, distracted by a group of women walking by the roadside, didn't notice the truck barreling toward them. The truck's brakes had failed, and its horn blared frantically, but by the time the driver looked up, it was too late. The truck smashed into the side of the bus with a deafening crash. Everything went dark for Chijioke. When he opened his eyes, he was lying in a white hospital bed. The sharp smell of disinfectant filled his nostrils, and the faint hum of machines buzzed in the background. His head throbbed, and his body felt heavy, but the first thing he saw was the tear-streaked faces of his parents. Chijioke. Ngozi cried, leaning over to hug him gently. My son. Thank God, you're awake. Chukwuma stood behind her, his face lined with relief. You're alive, my boy. We've been praying non-stop. Mama. Papa, Chijioke croaked, his voice weak. What happened? You were in an accident, Chukwuma explained, his voice breaking. The bus, the truck, it's a miracle you survived. Chijioke's heart sank as the memory of the crash came rushing back. What about, my friends? He asked, his voice trembling. Ngozi wiped her tears, her face crumpling. You're the only one who made it, my son. The words hit him like a blow. Torn and Wesu, gone. The other students on the bus, gone. The weight of it was unbearable. He closed his eyes, hot tears streaming down his face. In the days that followed, Chijioke couldn't stop thinking about what the old woman had told him, about what his parents had always said. Prayer. It wasn't something he could see or touch, but for the first time, he felt its power. He had survived what seemed impossible, and deep in his heart, he knew it wasn't just luck. When he was discharged from the hospital, Chijioke returned home a different boy. That evening, when his father called for prayers, he knelt down without hesitation, closing his eyes and praying with a sincerity that surprised even himself. His parents didn't say anything, they didn't need to. The joy in their hearts was evident in their smiles.